What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Film Jump with Jesse and Chris. We're going to be talking about Zack Snyder, the GOAT.
Yeah.
We did our first little director spotlight on arguably, probably definitively, the greatest director of the 21st century, Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, I love how it's arguably, maybe definitively.
Definitely definitively.
Yep.
Pretty soon, Denis Villeneuve, I think, is going to give him a run for money, but he's not quite there.
He's on his way.
He's right behind him, though.
He's on his way. Old Denny.
Yeah. Zack Snyder, or as I've heard him be called, Jacked Snyder.
Yeah, my younger brother calls him Jack Snyder. I'm like, it's a Z. He's Jack Snyder. I'm like,
Just
okay, fine.
Giga Chad, Jacked Snyder is what he is.
The alpha director.
The GOAT. As he was coined on Twitter anyways. Yeah, so check out our last video about Christopher Nolan. It's a really sincere video. We gave it some time. It was one of our first actual video production videos, if you will.
Yeah, editing and everything.
Yeah, it's an hour long. It's a lot, but we go over his entire filmography, and we're going to do that with Zack Snyder. So without any further ado, let's get into his filmography. I don't really want to get into his background, his schooling, him directing commercials, nothing like that. We're here to talk about movies and film.
Yeah.
So his first movie, Dawn of the Dead.
2004. April of 2004. My mother, God bless her, took me to theaters to see that movie when I was 11, going on 12.
That's crazy.
It was definitely a wild experience. The first time I was ever introduced to "The Man Comes Around" by Johnny Cash. Still love that song to this day. Only associated with the opening credits of Dawn of the Dead. A lot of great songs on that soundtrack. I'll unapologetically say that I like the 2004 Dawn of the Dead more than the original. The original is still great. I'm not taking anything away from that, but man, the 2004 Dawn of the Dead, it is relentless, and I love it.
Especially the ever so slightly more risque and better extended director's cut of that.
Yeah, it's one of those.
It's on the disc, and it's a little bit better.
Yeah, the unrated director's cut is definitely, that's the only version you watch. When you're talking about a zombie movie or a horror movie, the unrated is pretty much always the best cut.
Or a Zack Snyder movie, as we'll get into, you go for the director's cut.
Yeah, the man goes hard with director's cuts.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if this is common trivia knowledge here with this one, but in the opening, when it shows the helicopter and the dude with the machine gun, is that not Zack Snyder? Doing a cameo with the machine gun.
Yeah, where the military guys are standing in front of the helicopter.
Or something like that.
And it's like a line of military guys firing at an onslaught of zombies. Yeah, he's one of them.
Yeah, jumping ahead,
he points out who he is in the audio commentary.
Jumping ahead, is he not also the one, we'll talk about this later, but in Watchmen, I think he also has a similar cameo, brief cameo in the helicopter in the Vietnam flashback.
That one I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I'm telling you, we'll go back. I'll put it up.
You're more of the Watchmen guy than I am. I love the graphic novel.
All right, so back to Dawn of the Dead. I really love this one. It's super fun, and it is terrifying because in a post-apocalyptic zombie world with those kind of zombies, I'm done.
Yeah, and it's that nice 28 Days Later was always sort of professed as not a zombie movie,
infected.
Although it's sort of perceived as one. But in terms of the modern zombie movie era, you're talking 6 years before The Walking Dead. You're talking 5 years before Zombieland. I think it's the same year as Shaun of the Dead. This was right when that sort of this was kind of birthing the resurgence of the zombie genre that became very big for a long stretch of time. And for me, if I was to pick two favorite zombie movies of the last, 20, 25 years, I'd have to go Dawn of the Dead and Zombieland. I'd probably go with those two, the kind of more lighthearted one and then the more serious one. I think they kind of I just think they're above the rest, and it's an excellent action horror movie and a great feature film debut. You compare it to Following from Christopher Nolan. It's this is a studio movie. This is a big production, and it's got so much flair and polish and style,
and it's a hard R, and it's a good script written by James Gunn, which is kind of cool, kind of interesting.
Yeah, fun. Who would have thought that they would end up being such powerful forces in the superhero genre or just blockbuster films in general? Definitely both had huge careers ahead of them, and it's
kind of cyclical.
It's this weird it's crazy that you would think what would a movie written by James Gunn, directed by Zack Snyder look like? It's we got it very early in their careers. It's a wild
Although
thing.
It would be different today, but
it would be very different.
Yeah, man, it was hardcore. They had the Zombaby.
Zombaby.
That was crazy.
That was dark.
Crazy amount of gore. Ty Burrell, steals this show and some of his scenes. Like,
yeah, Ving Rhames kills it in the movie.
Sarah
I
Polley.
love Ving Rhames, Sarah Polley.
And then the Jake Weber guy, his Michael.
Yeah,
he plays like the everyman and
the moral compass.
Yeah.
Just a lot of great moments. Like it's got like Western vibes to it. He said like the Alamo was kind of like some of the inspiration. Just a lot of really, just really, really works and really kind of, you go back and see it and it's like so many of the staples of his style are there. The slow motion, the kind of hyper reality that he's sort of playing with. It's really, really darn good feature film debut.
And stick around on the credits. It kind of changes the whole movie.
Yeah, it kind of has like an extra ending. And depending on my mood, I either decide
watch it or don't.
Yeah, you either kind of, we cut it here or we kind of stay, you heed the warning like, hey, shut it off now because it's not going to get pretty. And then, if you venture forward, you get what you deserve, I suppose.
So let's move right along to, I think, what put him on the map as far as like, I think just in general. I mean, like,
before he was just the guy that directed the surprisingly good Dawn of the Dead remake that everyone thought was going to be horrible. After this, he was Zack Snyder.
Yeah. And this was back when I think he was like, oh man, this director, he's bringing it. This is cool.
He's cooking.
2007, 300, yes. Gerard Butler. And Lena Headey before Game of Thrones.
Yeah, when she was playing nice people instead of evil people.
And Michael Fassbender's in this one too, which is crazy to see him
before he was ever a thing.
Yeah, before First Class.
You're talking 4 years before X-Men First Class. Michael Fassbender.
So 300, about the 300 Spartans up against Xerxes and his millions, based on the same graphic novel. What a great adaptation!
Yeah,
visually, and this was like.
And it's like 5 steps removed from historical accuracy. You have the historical events that inspired a heavily stylized graphic novel, and then the graphic novel was turned into an even more sort of fantasy infused stylized feature film. It's like historical accuracy is not here. Outside of like there are 300 Spartans. Yeah. There's a lot of liberties taken, but it's much easier to watch this film. It's like, just imagine it as just a work of fantasy. Like it's a fantasy world. This is like, the planet of Greece. This is, this is its own reality. And when you take it on those terms, it's just pure awesome. I mean, it came out when we were about turning 15-ish. Before my dad took me to see this movie, and it was like, talk about a macho testosterone fueled experience, just incredible.
Yeah. I remember I was in Vegas with my parents. And we stayed at a hotel that had a movie theater and a bowling alley in it or whatever. It was kind of off the strip. And I think they were going to go out and do their, gambling thing. And I was only like, what were we, 16 at that time?
And in 2007, I was 14 going on 15 in March.
So, yeah. And I'm July. So I was the same age.
Yeah.
So I remember, I think, sneaking into 300 or at least watching the movie I was meant to go see. And then just sticking around because they weren't back yet and going to see 300. Either way. I snuck in.
Yeah.
I don't condone that behavior today. I support movie theaters.
Yeah.
Can't do that anymore. Anyways, what a visceral experience for a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
I became a man that day.
Yeah. It's kind of a a bit. Yeah. It's an adrenaline rush, And I think I snuck in, I'll admit it, I snuck in my second time seeing it.
Okay.
Me and my buddy, we went to go see Ghost Rider. And we're heading into like the third act of Ghost Rider, like the grand finale. And I'm like, there's a showing of 300 that's starting like right about now. I'm like, do you kind of just want to like dip over and go watch it? Because in this particular theater, they had a bathroom sort of section in the middle of the building, and so you could cut in through both sides. So you could enter the restroom on one side of the building and cut through and get to the other side of the building
easy.
Through it. They were begging for people to movie hop. So like, we're smart. We can look at the show times and the marquees on the doors and everything. So I'm like, we walked out, cut through, went into 300, missed maybe the first couple of minutes. I filled him in, and we watched 300, which was just way better. To this day, I've never seen the end of the first Nicolas Cage Ghost Rider movie. I know what happens, but like, I've never actually watched it. But yeah, so I got to see it twice in theaters, and yeah, it's awesome. I mean, so much style, the action, the visuals, the slow-mo, the music, the narration by David Wenham, it's just one of those movies that when you're a teenager, that is like the pinnacle of cool.
Yeah, and I feel like I don't want to say it revolutionized Hollywood filmmaking, but it introduced a new way with the green screen that I feel like was picked up and heavily copied after that. In the same way, like
sort of
that the volume has been
sort of standardized, because movies like Sky Captain and Sin City were kind of doing it
right before that,
and they had varying levels of success. But this sort of showed that it's like, well, you don't just have to do it for this sort of hyper stylized kind of thing. Like, you can do something a bit more mainstream for a blockbuster, not just like, oh, this is a cool little crime movie or something. Like, this really made it big. You know, the first Sin City movie made like 150, 200 million. This made like almost like 450 million at the box office. This was a blockbuster. This was huge. This was, you know, this changed the game. And so, you know, as far as like that sort of sword and sandals genre, you talk about Alexander and Troy and things like that. It's like, this is the one everyone remembers.
You have to, as far as like, when you talk about like the pantheon of great sword and sandals and epics, you have to include 300. Even though it's such a weird genre, like stylized movie, it's got to be up there.
It's sort of all of the kind of like period piece sort of sword and sandals reality that you get from something in an attempt like Troy, infused with all of the sort of wild fantasy spectacle that you would see in like Lord of the Rings.
Right.
All condensed into a very fast-paced, awesome, under 2-hour epic action movie where everyone,
with the slow-mo,
where everyone is insanely like shredded and cool and awesome and hyper testosterone and all, and epic violence and all of that stuff that you love.
You know, back in the day, then they still had scary movie, superhero movie, epic movie, all the
parody film.
Yeah, back when you had the parody films, this one was made fun of heavily.
Yeah,
and
they made Meet the Spartans.
Yeah,
like, it got its own.
Yeah, you're right, it did. How many movies get that?
Yeah, exactly. South Park did like I think at least an episode or two where they were kind of parodying elements of it. You know, it just it became a huge piece of the pop culture. People yelling, "This is Sparta." It became kind of like an iconic thing overnight.
Yeah, and I think to this day, if you ask many people, it's in their like top 2 or 3 favorite Snyder movies.
It's definitely I wouldn't put it not in the top 3 for me. I think.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have that many, but anyways, moving on. Fast forward to going to see The Dark Knight in the theater.
Yes.
You get one of, if not like the best superhero
teaser trailers
of all time.
Yep.
With Watchmen. And with the Smashing Pumpkins, the beginning is the end is a beginning.
Yes. Not to be confused with the end is the beginning is the end. It's the B-side. It's the beginning is the end is the beginning.
Right. And it is incredible. And I remember like thinking like that movie is going to be the movie. Zack Snyder is hot off of Dawn of the Dead and 300.
Yep.
The man can do no wrong.
Yeah, I was like, he's going 3 for 3. I read the graphic novel. I purchased it, blind purchase, and read the graphic novel on the strength of how cool I thought that teaser was. It was funny because I kind of knew that movie was coming because I was following Zack Snyder at this point. I was a fan. I'm good with my older brother and my best friend watching the trailers for The Dark Knight, and it starts to come up, and I had already seen the trailer. I knew this trailer was coming, and I'm like, yeah, it's from the director of 300. Then like flashes on the screen from the visionary director of 300. I'm like it's one of the best graphic novels of all time, and it's like the most celebrated graphic novel of all time. So it's like exactly what I was like. They knew how to pitch that movie for sure.
I think it's been said quite a bit recently in people's video reviews and essays and conversations. It's way ahead of its time.
Yeah,
had it come out today, it'd be more accepted because it's ultra violent. It's just a hard R
and very
adaptation.
And very meta for the genre. You know, people thought at the time like, oh, The Dark Knight just made $1 billion. Like, it's just the perfect time to drop Watchmen. It's like, no, the perfect time to drop something like Watchmen is about, you know, when you're 10 years deep into the MCU and you're ready to kind of rip this genre inside out and do something fresh and unique. The sort of pop culture placement that a movie like Joker kind of held, that's the kind of position that Watchmen could have held if the film had been made at the right time.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't think it could be adapted, and a lot of fans and people out there don't think it's a great adaptation. I think it's a good adaptation, and I like the changes from the graphic novel as far as like the ending goes and how they made how Dr. Manhattan is framed in a different way. I like or how he's framed in this one rather, and I think it works for the film much more.
Yeah, they made it a more effective film. I'm definitely one of those that I read the graphic novel and I loved it so much that I read it multiple times before I saw the movie, and so I was very like, well, everything they changed, I'm like, ooh, I don't know about that, and I don't know about that, and I was very eagle-eyed. I was like, well, all this stuff they added, they could have, if they didn't add all this stuff or alter all this stuff, there's that many more things from the graphic novel they could have brought to the movie. You know, I was just very sort of like, I wanted that kind of page for page, line for line, but it's very close to that. But the fact that it was so close, but then kind of like 10% less than that, I'm like, well, why couldn't we just get it kind of like all the way? But it is a really good, like, it's aged well. It's a really good adaptation. It's got strong visuals. The infusion of a little bit of like stylized action works. You know, you can nitpick it here and there. Some of the performances maybe aren't so amazing, you know.
But others are great. I think Billy Crudup as Dr. Manhattan,
he kills it. And I'm a big fan of Patrick Wilson, especially in this movie. I think he's just like that sort of everyman superhero, sort of Batman ripoff kind of character that he plays. Like, it's a really good arc.
And Jackie Earle Haley as Rorschach.
Yeah, he kills it as Rorschach. Absolutely. You know, pretty much was cast as Freddy Krueger based on him being Rorschach in this movie.
They'll look up and shout, "Save us," and I'll look down and whisper, "No."
Exactly.
So
like, that's such a perfect finishing line to that initial teaser too. So good. And yeah, it's aged well. It's not one of my favorite Snyders. It's good. It's really good. It's got a lot of greatness in it, but like, I just like some of his other stuff, you know, a little bit more. And
I think for the first time, it's only his third film, but I think for the first time you look at this one, and though it is a longer picture or film, the director's cut is so much better.
A big step
and
up.
It's a 3-hour film, and that's not including the ultimate edition that includes the Tales of the Black Freighter comic turned cartoon,
which is just for psychos.
Which is intercut.
That's for psychos.
Yeah, the perfect version of this is just simply the director's cut without Tales of the Black Freighter intercut in it.
Definitely.
And you get a sequence with the original Night Owl, who the gang, the Top Knots, I believe, they think he's the one who's taken whatever. And it's set to the music from The Godfather, I believe, and it's a fantastic sequence.
It's doing these great flashes, but I'm sure we'll have some footage. It's doing the great editing where as he's beating up these thugs who don't think he can pack a punch, he's having flashbacks to his glory days of fighting crime when he was in his prime. And it's such a, just, again, Snyder knows how to do a lot of great visual storytelling, and people will write off strong visuals in a movie as, oh, just flashy visuals, just cool cinematography, just nice contrasts and saturated colors. But it's like, no, it's like editing, framing, camera movement, color choices, like that stuff. Like, there's visual storytelling, and the fact that it's visual and not spelled out to you in dialogue is why so many people don't even have an appreciation.
And I think a big criticism I remember hearing a lot of people is that his films, especially in a movie like Watchmen, has a lot of great moments, but not a lot of great scenes.
And I would say I could maybe argue that the parts are a little bit greater than that the whole is weaker than the sum of the parts, if that's the way to word it. I know what you're trying to say. There are perfect aspects of it. As a whole, it's not quite a perfect movie.
Yeah, but I think that kind of happens when you try and take an adaptation from a graphic novel with panels, and you try and bring those, and you can't just have a flash of that panel. And you kind of want the audience to marinate on that amazing image, so you kind of do the slow-mo.
Yeah, and Snyder kind of openly admitted, he said, you know, they were going to make this movie, and I got the chance to do it. He goes, I doubt that most people that do it are going to try and have the fealty to the graphic novel that I know I will. He's like, I'm going to do my best to try and just make it as close to the graphic novel as I reasonably can. And I knew what they were cooking up was less than that. Wasn't going to be that close. You know, they had, you know, a major character getting killed at the end of the movie because they were the quote unquote bad guy, and the hero has to kill the bad guy at the end of the movie, and that's like a total slap in the face to the spirit of the end of the graphic novel. So it's like stuff like that. It's like, to quote Jurassic Park, could have been worse, John. A lot worse.
Yeah, I know Alan Moore has kind of disgraced it, or it's a disgrace to him.
He doesn't think any of his stuff really should become movies. I think that's just his kind of like par for the course thing. Yeah. Like any deviation is destroying his work as he sees it. You know, I think he's a little bit curmudgeon in that way, but, you know.
I think it's fantastic. It's one of my favorite Snyder movies. I like it more than you do. I just think it has so much to offer, and it has a lot to say. It's got, I think it's more thematically rich than a movie like Dawn of the Dead or even some of his later works. You know, I think 300 is thematically rich, and that doesn't make a movie better than not having, you know, themes or whatever, but I really, really like it. Way ahead of its time. Great needle drops, an awkward one with Hallelujah, but you know what?
Yeah. It's kind of iconic in its own way. Now. You know, if it doesn't become a classic scene, it can become a meme scene.
I gotta say
people
though,
love it for that.
I gotta say it's a beautifully shot movie
and scene.
You know, it really is. When you look at the composition, the lighting on a technical basis, it's a very, very good looking film.
Zack Snyder and Larry Fong are an excellent director, cinematographer duo. Like, I think they should always work together, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the VFX, some of it's a little shoddy with I forgot the name of the tiger, but I think the VFX with like Dr. Manhattan works really well because he doesn't do a whole lot of quick movements.
And that's
so
what
that,
helps.
that animation isn't weird feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, there are some still close-ups that to this day still hold up incredibly well.
Yeah.
You know, and I know, like, you hear stories about when this was being pitched in like the 80s and 90s that there were concepts of like Arnold Schwarzenegger being painted blue and being Dr. Manhattan. Like, there was like, that's the sort of thing they were thinking of. It's like, maybe there's a weird reality where that could have worked, but like, could you imagine Arnold delivering that dialogue?
Moving on. The Owl movie.
The Owl movie. Yeah, that's the official title, right? The Owl movie.
Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole.
Yeah, okay.
I went to go see this in the theater. I saw it with my buddy.
This was
with my buddy Dave. Shout out to Dave.
Yeah, Dave. Awesome. This was the first time that I know him as well. That's why I'm shouting him out. I'm not just randomly saying shout out Dave. This was the first Zack Snyder movie that I was like, well, I was 3 for 3, and I guess now he's making like kids movies, and I'm not gonna go see this in theaters.
Okay, so I'll talk more about this one then. Legend of the Guardians, I think, is actually much better than people give it credit for. I think it's underrated. Visually, it's like a little bit of that 300, high contrast, backlit, crazy, sepia, almost Lord of the Rings
but
vibe,
with owls.
But with owls.
And owls that even from trailers you can tell are kind of like this is an animated movie, but
back then,
kind of surprisingly photorealistic or hyper realistic in terms of how they're being executed. They're not like, it's not like Angry Birds animation or something like that. It looks like they're owls and they're just talking and kind of animated up.
People were really obsessed over Happy Feet at that time, and I think this came out after that. I'll have to double check.
It's the same animation company,
right. So they're like, ooh, birds, They're like, this can work.
Hollywood only learns those lessons. They only know how to ape the most basic concept.
And I think a problem with this movie, though, is there's only a few scenes and moments that you can tell were actually directed by Zack Snyder. And some of them are beautifully
or at least
shot.
Infused with his kind of stamp.
Yeah. It's rather generic, but it works as a cartoon, as an animated movie, I should say. Yeah. It's a solid movie. I mean, it's better than a lot of the animated movies we've gotten recently. It holds up better. It's got cool action, cool visuals.
How many other movies can you just refer to as the Owl movie and everyone knows exactly what you're talking about?
Yeah. It's good. I recommend it. I recommend it. It's a good watch. It's actually not the worst Zack Snyder movie, and that's, not to do it a disservice. It's far from the worst Zack Snyder movie. We'll get into that.
Yeah, that's true, especially now. Yeah.
We'll move right along, though. Not a lot to say about the Owl movie, except I think it's good. Go watch it.
Yeah.
Sucker Punch.
I'm like a low-key, like, diehard fan of this movie.
The music video movie.
Yeah. It's essentially like a feature-length music video. It's like the whole movie's just kind of like this vibe. It's kind of this sort of...
It's a concept.
It's like a lucid dream. Like a concept album brought to cinematic form, and I love it for that. Like, I'm historically not really ever a fan of these movies where it's kind of all nonsense or kind of all open to interpretation or weird or in their head or a dream. But this is just one of those where it's like the style and the action and the visuals and the aesthetic, it's so well executed that you just want to sit and kind of let the movie wash over you, whether you think it's all nonsense or you're finding something within there or not. Like, it's one of the most like visually pleasing to the eye movies that I think maybe has ever been made. It's just, you look at it and it's like, well, this is just cool and awesome and hot,
and from top to bottom you can tell it's a Zack Snyder movie.
Yes.
The visuals are cranked up. He dumps a lot of his ideas in there and tries to make a story out of them, and it's a little weird. And I think for a lot of people this is probably I say a lot of people, maybe like general audience, this is one of their least favorite Zack Snyder movies, I think.
And at the time when it came out, you could hear a lot of the discourse was like, this is a movie with no plot and no story. It's just stupid, dumb visuals. Like, what is this? This isn't even a movie. Yeah. And it's like, it feels like that's kind of the point with this. Like, it's kind of
this was the first time that he got to do an original concept, original movie. And that doesn't happen a whole lot for a director to get a budget and to be able to do this. And this is when... I believe it's Warner Brothers, right?
Yeah.
They meddled heavily in this movie.
And you can tell that he's just kind of like playing in his playground. He has a sort of thin narrative device that allows him to do whatever kind of sequences and visuals and characters and creatures and concepts that he wants to do without any need for well, what's the science of it? Does it make sense? What's the plot mechanism by which we can have dragons and orcs and also robots and bombs and samurai schoolgirls and things like that? Like, he's just like, well, it would be like, I want to see it. I want to put it on screen. It's unique to see, and he executes it, and it's all kinds of awesome, you know? Emily Browning is like really good in the lead performance, and she's singing songs on the soundtrack. Like, the whole movie just goes hard, you know?
It's cool. It's like a live action anime.
It very much is.
Really
Absolute anime vibes in this movie, 100%.
What I really like about it, couple things. My introduction to Oscar Isaac.
Yeah.
He's a great
agreed.
bad guy.
Yeah.
Great bad guy.
Yeah.
And the musical number that's included, I don't know, is it cut out?
It's cut out of the theatrical, and I don't love it in the director's cut. Yeah.
I love it unabashedly. I think it's so fun.
I'm actually one of those that I'm kind of the opinion of, like, the shorter theatrical cut for me. I'm like, I like that lean, mean, like, let it just kind of be this sort of trippy music video aesthetic trip kind of a thing. I think the scenes they add back to the director's cut kind of like kill the pace a little bit. I don't like that big musical number, and then there's a very extended dialogue.
Such a good song
near the end. Yeah, it's a good song. It's catchy and stuff. But this is one where I'm like, I kind of go with the theatrical because I just want the movie to kind of just be this like quick and sweet experience.
Yeah, it's a wild movie. You get Zack Snyder's version of Lord of the Rings. You get an AI robot shootout. You get his version of zombie World War II. Like, he's got a lot of cool stuff in here.
Steampunk Nazi zombies.
Yeah.
Like, that's the kind of thing you can only hear about in a Zack Snyder movie.
With like, an Asian, like, mech type deal. Like, in there. Like, it's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, folks. Well, we appreciate you listening. Let us know what you think about Zack Snyder or what your favorite Zack Snyder movie is. Don't hate on him. We will not tolerate any of that here. I will delete it so fast.
Only we're allowed to hate on Zack Snyder.
Yeah, so, all right. Well, thanks for stopping by.
Have a good one.
Spartans! What is your profession?